All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to episode 2 of what we're kind of calling Album Swap. This is kind of a series that we started a couple weeks ago, but intentionally it's been a couple weeks so that we can kind of digest the albums that we've been given. I'm joined here by my co-host and guest, Brian from Massey's Main Entertainment. Hello, Brian.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. And for those that don't know, this is a series where each of us presents the other guy with a few albums. We choose one that the other guy's picked. We listen to it for a week or two, and then come back and give our thoughts and kind of give a ranking. Talk about why we loved it, why we hated it, why it was just meh to us. Why we ordered it on Amazon that day. Whatever strikes us as the series goes along. So today we are talking about, I would say, two fairly different artists, definitely different albums. We are talking about the 12th studio album by Paul Simon. This is the album that I loaned Brian. So Beautiful or So What. Again, Paul Simon, American, singer-songwriter, obviously, started with Simon and Garfunkel. Has had an illustrious career that's still going on today. Crazy to think this album is as old as it is, and it's considered one of his new ones. And then I listened to the third studio album by The War on Drugs, called Lost in a Dream, kind of an indie neo-psych group out of Philadelphia.
Yes.
That's what Brian loaned me. So we're both going to, give a couple minutes each here, talk about what we liked, what we disliked, if we liked anything at all. And this week, I'm going to go first talking about The War on Drugs. Then I'm going to hand it over to Brian, and then we will close up by presenting some albums for next time. So, again, I was listening to Lost in a Dream by The War on Drugs. Now, The War on Drugs were a band and are a band that, in my, algorithm for, music on YouTube, social media, I'm constantly getting ads for the War on Drugs albums, like, buy this album, or here's some, if you like this artist, you'll like the War on Drugs. Because again, I mean, last time I presented Brian with Lord Huron, so they're kind of, when you think that genre, they're kind of thrown in there with those guys. You see them a lot on, similar festival bills. It wouldn't be too far-fetched for these two groups, groups like them to tour together maybe. But this was a group, again, I think I'd heard one song by them from an indie radio station around here. And I remember, and again, I wish I remember the song that it was. I think it was from their latest record, but I remember listening to it and kind of dug it. And that was kind of the extent of my knowledge on the War on Drugs. So I really kind of went into these guys completely blind. And I know that you had mentioned last time that Kurt Vile was a very early member. I think he was on the first record and then kind of skedaddled, did his solo career, which he's still, going through. And I know Kurt Vile can have mixed fan bases. Some people love him, some people hate him. I know I have respect for him. I don't know a lot of his stuff, but I know he was a big fan of John Prine, so that makes him a little cool in my eyes. But so again, this was a whole new immersion for me, and kind of interesting too that these two albums, the Paul Simon and this album, kind of around the same time, just a 3-year difference, with mine being with the Lost in a Dream being the newer of the two records. War on Drugs is kind of it's kind of almost a solo project at this point from their lead guy, Andrew Granduciel. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, I think so. I've probably mispronounced it about 50 times every time I've ever talked about the band.
I mean, from what I can tell, I mean, he's, if you look at the, the credits on this album, he did a lot of the playing on it. The writing is pretty much all in his court. And that's always, interesting when you see these bands where, you think, just off of first glance, it's, they're a collective unit, but really it's kind of revolving around one guy under this name. Again, similar to Lord Huron in a lot of senses with Ben Schneider. But again, went into this, started the album. I had it available on YouTube, so that's how I listened to it. the times that I listened to it the last week or so. And it started off with the song Under the Pressure, which is, right off the gate, a sprawling, almost 9-minute track. Kind of starts with this weird sound effect, and then it goes into this kind of like spacey sounding 80s kind of guitar tones, some piano with a lot of reverb on it. Kind of reminded you in a little bit of, with my listening, it reminded me a little bit of maybe like what the Killers are, trying to do as well, with kind of like that influence from, Springsteen, Bob Seger, groups like that, kind of like that heartland 80s rock, kind of that sound. And again, looking over, studying these guys this past week, it looked like that was pretty accurate for some of the influences that they were pulling from. It looks like they also cite Neil Young and Crazy Horse as a big influence as well. I didn't get any of that in this record. It's not this is not a rocking album. This is not really it's not a hook laden album. And all of the songs kind of have this, undertone of, that 80s production, but at the same time, there's also a lot of, I'd say, darkness to the record. Kind of reminded me a little bit maybe of some Elliott Smith stuff thrown in there. I don't know if he is somebody that they pull from much. But it's, again, interesting. The first two tracks are pretty much the most 80s sounding. I mean, they both, have that feel to them, Under the Pressure and Red Eyes. And I enjoyed both of those a good bit. It took me a minute to get into Under the Pressure, especially because it does kind of sprawl out at the end, and you keep kind of waiting for a hook, and it's not really, again, it doesn't seem like that's that type of band, at least on this album. Again, I don't know how they've matured or how they've grown or in any kind of way. Another track that I really enjoyed was Eyes to the Wind. This one kind of felt, like if the album Nebraska by Springsteen had been, 85, like, 80s, produced, like if they said like, oh, we're going to take, Atlantic City and we're going to add that 80s production to it. That's kind of what Eyes to the Wind sounded like, because I think there was some harmonica on there. Again, the kind of the folkiest of all the songs on this album, which obviously is going to pull me in a little bit more than others, because again, I'm not a huge 80s guy. Again, like a lot of people, I'm sure like at the time, it was cool, but like looking back on it now, 40, 45 years for some of that stuff, it's one of the more dated decades. But again, there's stuff that's not like that. So that was probably one of the biggest elements of listening to this album that I was kind of, I was like, it's not fully pulling me in the way I want it to. It did remind me a little bit of, again, that Lord Huron sound, because they'd have tracks like The Haunting Idol, which is just, and that's IDLE, which is just like kind of like an ambient instrumental kind of sounding piece, almost like a mood setter. And that goes into the song Burning, which is a little bit more up tempo. But that one takes its time to get to any kind of lyrics or anything like that. And again, the songs in between, there's a lot of slower mid-tempo tracks. I think, again, with reading, it looked like Andrew was dealing with kind of some, depression as a result of being off the road. And he was just trying to pour his heart into a record that looks like they said that it took 2 years to record this thing. And most of the tracks are going to be over 5 minutes. There are several that are over 6, a couple over 7. And then the opening track, Under the Pressure, is almost 9. So, 10 tracks, but it's an hour. So you're looking about six minutes of track when you balance it out. And then it closes with the second longest track on the album, In Reverse, which is again kind of a slower, mid-tempo track. So I think all in all, probably one of the biggest beefs that I had with the album was I wanted there to be catchy kind of hooks, because the music, there's a lot of the music that you're thinking like it's gonna make me hum along to it. And I think that was, for me, the biggest thing missing from the album was that I wasn't able to really hum along to a lot of it. And again, that's fine, because I mean, I like, Tom Waits, and Tom Waits doesn't exactly have, sing along tunes. And again, a lot of the artists I don't, that I like don't have those types of tunes. But to me, I think that kind of kept this album from being one that I was like, ooh, this is one that I, that I really need to go back to and listen to. It didn't fully excite me the way that I wanted it to. And I think that kind of, brought it down, more so than, like the Water Boys album from a couple of weeks ago, where that one, a lot of those tracks, I was like, ooh, I could see myself getting more and more into this. Whereas this one, again, probably part of it was length. Part of it was that there weren't the hooks that I like as much. Again, it wasn't an offensive album to me in terms of the music. It didn't like drive me insane, but again, it has a lot of space. There's a lot of kind of, jammy, kind of like, lay back and close your eyes and see the tie dye, in your eyes.
Yeah.
Kind of psyche. So, yeah, for me, was it a great album? No. Is it an album that, if it was on in the background, I would like, be offended? No. Again, it's got a lot of elements of music that I like. It just didn't have what would make an album, warranted to, come into my collection necessarily. But again, maybe it's one of those groups, again, kind of like Elliott Smith. He's somebody else that I'm not fully into, and I like that kind of, sad songwriting stuff. Maybe at some point it'll perk my ears up again. But right now I'm thinking like, I probably need a little bit of space from it. But I'm glad I listened to it, because I hear so much about the war on drugs, and I was never educated to talk about them, and I'm still not. But at least now I can kind of get a feel of who they are. So
yeah, they've had their last album was I Don't Live Here Anymore, and then the one that turned me on to it was, and the only reason is when I like to look at lists and try to run albums that I'd never listened to before. And Rolling Stones had it, and it was actually at number 100 of the top 100 albums of the 2010s, and that was their album A Deeper Understanding. So I listened to that one. It was the same song structures. It's like they don't make singles. They're not out to make singles. They're making a project. And they look at the album as one entire piece that they can play in concert, and it becomes this, event rather than, a series of singles. Because I mean, the lengths of the tracks, even on that album, were 7 minutes. I think Thinking of a Place was like 11 and a half minutes. And they're good songs, but they're like that long. So you're just not, it's not something you're not going to get radio airplay.
No,
it just it wouldn't exist,
Right.
But that band turns me on, I guess, mostly for just, I can put that on in headphones, and there's this weird experience subconsciously if I'm doing other things where it kind of resonates with me for some reason. It has this place, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as if you give it a score, what would you think you might give it a score if you had to?
Out of 10, I would probably give it, probably for me around a 6. And again, I'm not one to necessarily like longer songs. I mean, even, the longer Dylan songs, the Bob Dylan songs, are ones that I'm not as drawn to. Like,
Desolation
Highlands.
Row, or
that's the thing. The funny thing is, Desolation Row was one that I probably like the one exception.
Right.
But
Visions of Johanna. I know you're not a fan of Visions of Johanna.
I know, some people like that song a lot. But yeah, probably a 6. And I think, again, mostly because of part of it is length. Part of it is, I wish that there were a few songs that I was, thinking about more after I finished it, So, right. But I'm happy. I've got it, under the belt.
Nice. Well, tell me about the album that you gave me then. A little bit.
Yeah. So this album, So Beautiful or So What, I think, if I remember, this was the first Paul Simon album that I purchased new when it came out.
Nice.
So, I mean, I would have been a junior in high school, I think, when this came out. And I remember telling one of my high school teachers who loved music. He loved Dylan and the Dead. And I was telling him about this. I was like, you need to listen to this album. And it's like, I remember talking about this. And, about this point, I already knew I had a Simon and Garfunkel greatest hits. I love Graceland already at this point. And that was about all of my Paul Simon knowledge. So this was an early, introduction to, deeper Paul Simon songs that weren't just, greatest hits. So
this one was, for me, I'm like, I listened to this one. Like I said, I listened to it three different times, one completely without looking at lyrics or information. And then I listened to one in a car where I'm just kind of zoning out, subconsciously listening. And then I listen with lyrics in front of me, Wikipedia in front of me, kind of trying to resonate. And then I go back and listen to the tracks that I liked again just before we talk. I know this was the first album that he self-produced after he left Warner Brothers. And I had not listened to any albums post Rhythm of the Saints with Paul Simon. So I know that that's a gap between 1990 and 2011. Yeah. So that's a gap there. Is I hadn't listened to anything by Paul Simon on it. What I do appreciate before I talk about the tracks specifically is, just like Graceland and just like Rhythm of the Saints, Paul embraces world instruments and different types of sounds. Yeah. And this album is no exception. I mean, I'm going to be able to read a list of some stuff that was used in making this album. I mean, instruments like the saz, a talking drum, a resonator, a crotail, an aklung, a gong, a harp, wind chimes, just all sorts of different stuff. He's really known for using a lot of different percussion instruments, and especially multiple time signatures being played at the same time with those instruments. He has a lot of people featured here who are renowned for doing these sorts of things. Also, the guy from Grizzly Bear, Chris Bear, is actually also featured on this album as well. And I thought that was kind of really cool. The tracks that stood out to me and kind of the reasons why here. Hold on a second. I'm gonna scroll my notes here a little bit. I like to type it up in Word and stuff. The tracks that stood out to me, my favorite song on here is Dazzling Blue. It's a love song inspired with his about his partner Edie Brickell. For anybody who doesn't know, a longtime partner, Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. She was very popular in the late 80s. Features an intricate guitar work and harmonies, great African rhythms and Indian percussions, like I said before. It's got these weird effects that he's been using on the guitar and the instruments throughout the whole album that I just thought was incredible. This song stood out the most to me. And the title track, So Beautiful or So What, right at the end, had like a completely different sound. It was almost bluesy. Mm-hmm. It had like a Bo Diddley type of feel to it, and but it had that Bo Diddley sound, but then like the subject matter didn't fit like with traditional blues type of stuff. Yeah. It's like it's like existentialism is talking about, why are we here type of thing, thought-provoking type of things, but with that type of with melody and stuff, which I thought was really interesting. And then of course the leadoff track, which it's weird because you're thinking it's getting ready for Christmas Day, and it's mixing, this weird sound effect with the guitar, and then it's mixing this 1941 sermon by Reverend J.M. Gates, and it kind of blends those things together. And it's like, wow, this is weird that you've got this Christmas song, because this album came out in like April or something.
Yeah, it wasn't
like
Christmas.
Early summer or something when this album came out, so Christmas was like very far away. But it was kind of interesting to listen to, and I could see how people would listen to it during the holidays, and it just doesn't fit the traditional type of Christmas song.
Yeah.
Another track I really liked was Rewrite. I thought was good because that kind of tells a story, just more of a storytelling Simon that I think we're all used to from the 60s and 70s. The story of a Vietnam veteran. Imagine if he could rewrite his life, with a much more happy ending. I like it because I'm really into ambient music and stuff, and this incorporates a lot of ambient sounds, and used some Kenyan instruments in this. Had a very unique atmosphere to it, so I really liked it. And then something that was much more contemporary for Simon on here was Questions for the Angels, which I thought was like, I like the fact, one, that he gave a big shout out to Jay-Z in that. I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, well, I said, did he say Jay-Z? I had to go back and look at the lyrics. I was like, yeah, he was talking about Jay-Z. I thought it was pretty cool. But really, it's more like a contemplative piece, talking about, again, existentialism, spirituality, and then like I said, it really had that Jay-Z reference, and then it felt like it was kind of bridging the gap between particular styles in that song. So that stood out to me as well. I mean, those are that's 5 songs that I liked. Some of the things that I like looking at the things that kind of stand out as a weird things about the album. It says that he recorded it in a small cottage right on his own property, which was not soundproof. So he said he was constantly trying to edit out the ambient tertiary sounds that were happening outside of his cottage. Like, the wind would blow and it would like go through a crack, or he said even acorns falling off the tree. He'd have to get that out of there, because the mics and the instrumentation, the equipment was picking up all those sounds. I think, maybe if you left some of those things in there, maybe it would have given it a more authentic feel. I will say this is the downside for me anyway. The tracks I really liked, but the like 4 of the tracks I couldn't get to resonate with me at all. It felt too close to what he's already done, and in his early stuff, in the early 70s and stuff. It just felt too close to that, or for some reason it just, I don't know, it just didn't click with me at all. Like I didn't really like Love and Hard Times. Some people do. And then Love is Eternal Sacred Light. For some reason, I kept going back and forth about whether I liked that song or not. And I said, ultimately, I just don't think it's going to fit. It's going to fit with me. I just can't really get it to, to click.
Got that cool like bass tone to it.
Yeah, it was something weird about it. I kept going, do I like it? Do I, and I don't know. It might take several more listens to do. I think overall, I like the album, and I think for someone who's been doing music as long as he has, for him to be willing to keep maturing as an artist and trying different things, I got mad respect for. He's always been a strong songwriter. He's always been strong at creating melodies and stuff. And I'm always praising him and Peter Gabriel for being willing to use world sounds in their music, which is just not done a lot by a lot of people. So, but I did enjoy the album. I mean, I've got it added to my Spotify, catalog and library for myself. Maybe not an album I would revisit a lot, but again, it's not an album that, like you said, if somebody was playing it in the background, I'm not going to be offended. And I certainly would, hum along on the tracks that I did like whenever I got the tracks like that. So,
yeah.
But overall, I think I gave it a score of 6.75 for now.
Okay.
And I thought maybe that was probably as much as it was going to resonate with me. I mean, like I said, Dazzling Blue and the title track are just absolutely standout tracks to me. So,
yeah, it's neat. I mean, I was fortunate. I got to see Paul in 2018 on his Homeward Bound farewell tour with my mom. And my mom is a huge fan of the songs Dazzling Blue and Rewrite. She sings Rewrite all the time, especially where he's, going, help me, help me, help me. Thank you. Yeah. But so to hear him do those songs live was really special, with her. And I'm glad that you pointed both of those songs out as favorites. But then also, like, you get to hear, especially, I mean, his last album, especially that he just put out last year, but the song Amulet, which is like this minute and a half.
It's kind of short.
But just what a song, I mean, what a guitar player he is. I mean, he's never mentioned, with, Hendrix or anybody like that as a guitar player. But Paul Simon is a heck of a guitar player. So just throwing that out there. But no, very cool. I'm glad that, I mean, it's a short album. So you pick 5 songs, that's half the album. So I'm glad that,
Yeah, I mean, that's traditionally my scores will fall between 6.75 and 7.5 whenever I like about half the songs.
Yeah.
It's usually somewhere in there. Yeah.
Well, that's neat. We're both kind of in the same scoring range then for the albums that we gave for this week. So Yeah, before we present next week's, yeah, just let us know in the comments so that we know if have you heard these two albums before? What do you think about them? Are we completely off? Please fight with us in the comments. We'll respond, and we might fight back a little bit depending on who you are. So now is the fun part of this, where we kind of reveal what we've been thinking about this week, with some new albums that we're going to present to the other guy. We usually give a few choices because we don't know what the other guys heard. We don't know every album that they've ever heard. And we like to give them options because you can kind of describe a little bit about the style of each album. So because I went first, I guess, Brian, you can present your albums for this week, and I'll make a call here.
Okay, my first one for you is Donald Fagen's The Night Fly, his solo album from the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, Steely Dan's dude there. He had The Night Fly. The second one is Sufjan Stevens, Carrie and Lowell.
Carrie and Lowell.
Carrie and Lowell, Lowell. And the last one, I'm going to go totally off the rails on the last one here.
All right.
I'm gonna pick Massive Attack Mezzanine, which is a trip hop album. That's completely out of your wheelhouse.
It's definitely out of the wheelhouse. I feel like I've heard a lot of things about Sufjan Stevens, and I've also always been somebody that's like kind of avoided Steely Dan. I mean, I know, like the Steely Dan hits, but like I've never listened to, Asia or, Pretzel Love. I've never listened to any of that stuff. So I'm interested in Fagen. I'm also kind of thinking, I don't want to try to fall too much into my wheelhouse, but let me do Don Fagen, because he's the first out of the last couple where the last couple I hadn't heard really anything by those guys. Fagen, I'm a little bit I know the basic stuff, so I'll do The Night Fly then.
Okay.
All right. So for me, I picked three artists that I don't think you've heard anything from, because last time I gave you the Paul Simon option, and I didn't want it to feel, again, I didn't for what I just did by picking Fagen, I didn't want you to do to fall somebody you knew about. So these are all three artists that I talk about all the time on my channel. The first one is going to be this album by one of my favorite artists, Pokey LaFarge. It's called Manic Revelations, and I would say this is kind of his rockabilly-ish album. It's got a lot of 50s and early 60s influence to it. He's, spanned the board. He's done, like ragtime music like Leon Redbone. He's got his voice kind of reminds you like that he could fall into that category. Very unique artist. So Manic Revelations by Pokey LaFarge. Then I'm going to go, again, another one of my favorite groups, the Wild Feathers. Their album Alvarado, so Alvarado, for Alvarado, Texas. This is kind of if you like, 3-part harmony, Eagles kind of stuff. They've got big influences with the Eagles, with Tom Petty, 3 lead singers, so you get different voices throughout the thing. So this is a really good album off of New West Records. So it's got some great production there. And then lastly, this is a group who actually just put out a new album on Friday, but this is their debut, self-titled, called The Devil Makes Three.
I saw that pop up on my suggestion thing for Spotify.
And what's cool about them, because you look at them and it's just three individuals that, with a stand-up bass, guitar, and then banjo or, fiddle or whatever. One guy's multi-instrumental. They're bluegrass instruments, but it's not bluegrass music. These guys come from like the punk kind of metal veins. Like you look at them, they're tatted up. They've got piercings. They've all lived pretty hard. And this has just some it's just got some pretty it's got some pretty good stuff on it. Just kind of like dark cowpunk almost kind of stuff. So those are the three for you this week.
Okay.
So
I think I'm going to go with the last one. I think I'm going to go with Devil Makes 3.
very cool.
Give that a go.
Yeah, and it's that debut, and there you'll probably see a couple versions. This CD, I think, has a couple of bonus tracks, which are both good. But I think the traditional album has 12 tracks. But
Okay.
Either way, I almost only know this album with the 2 bonus tracks because that's all I've ever listened to. But very, very cool. So next week or 2 weeks, I guess, we'll be doing The Night Fly by Don Fagen, and then the debut by Devil Makes 3. They're self-titled. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please subscribe to Brian's channel. I'm going to have his information below. And again, comment, let us know, what you think of this episode. So in the meantime, we'll talk to you on the next one. Bye now.